Welcome to the Dakota Live podcast. I'm your host, Robert Morier. The goal of this podcast is to help you better know the people behind investment decisions. We introduce you to chief investment officers, manager research professionals, and other important players in the industry who will help you sell in between the lines and better understand the investment sales ecosystem. If you're not familiar with Dakota and our Dakota Live content, please check out dakota.com to learn more about our services. Before we get started, I need to read a brief disclosure. This content is provided for informational purposes and should not be relied upon as recommendations or advice about investing in securities. All investments involve risk and may lose money. Dakota does not guarantee the accuracy of any of the information provided by the speaker who is not affiliated with Dakota. Not a solicitation, testimonial, or an endorsement by Dakota or its affiliates. Nothing herein is intended to indicate approval, support, or recommendation of the investment advisor or its supervised persons by Dakota. The comments made by Zach Ruchman on this podcast are his opinion and may not reflect those of HP Wealth. Nothing in this podcast should be interpreted as investment advice, and all information is educational in nature only. All investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Private investments are not suitable for all investors. Investments should review private funds offering documents prior to investment. Prior to making any investment, an investor should consult their financial advisor. Today's episode is brought to you by Dakota Marketplace. Are you tired of constantly jumping between multiple databases and channels to find the right investment opportunities? Introducing Dakota Marketplace, the comprehensive institutional and intermediary database built by fundraisers for fundraisers. With Dakota Marketplace, you'll have access to all channels and asset classes in one place, saving you time and streamlining your fundraising process. Say goodbye to the frustration of searching through multiple databases and say hello to a seamless and efficient fundraising experience. Sign up now and see the difference Dakota Marketplace can make for you. Visit dakotamarketplace.com today. Well, I am thrilled to welcome to Philadelphia Zach Ruchman, Managing Director of Private Investments with Hamrick Berg, HB Wealth. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. As always, Andrew O'Shea from Dakota, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you. Very excited to have Zach here and obviously hear a little bit more about the merger of WMS and HB, two of the premier East Coast multifamily offices. So excited to get an update.
Absolutely. We are as well. So again, thank you for being here. Before we get started, I'm going to read your biography for the audience.
Sounds good.
In his role as Managing Director of Private Investments, Zach Ruchman leads the team responsible for research and due diligence of private market investment opportunities across a variety of asset classes, including private equity, growth equity, venture capital, private credit, infrastructure, and real assets. Before joining HB Wealth, Zach was a senior vice president at Rock Creek and a vice president at BlackRock, where he led direct co-investment transactions, as well as manager research for both primary and secondary commitments in the Americas, Europe, and Asia on behalf of both institutional and family office clients. He began his career as a consultant with Alvarez & Marsal. In the community, Zach serves as a member of the finance committee for the Howard and Geraldine Pollinger Family Foundation. Zach earned a BA in Public Policy from Princeton University and an MBA from the University of Virginia Darden School of Business, where he was a Jefferson Fellow. Zach lived in Amman, Jordan for a year, where he was a Fulbright Fellow at Jordan Applied University. Today, Zach and his wife, Michelle, call the Washington, D.C. home. Zach, thank you again for joining us. Congratulations on all your success.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here as well. It's always nice to have guests in the Philadelphia studio. It always makes it more special, especially we can sit across from each other and have Andrew with us. So again, Andrew, thanks for being here as well. So tell us a little bit about your early journey, Zach. It's always interesting to hear why people studied what they studied, particularly at Princeton. You're studying public policy. I believe there was a minor in Near Eastern Studies. So how did you come to that major, and how did it take you on this path?
There were two formative events growing up for me. The first was 9/11, living right outside of New York. And my dad had at one point worked in the World Trade Center. He was actually on a plane from New York to California on that day. He said there's never been, he never hit the ground faster than when they went from 30,000 feet to Cleveland, a few minutes after the first plane hit. The second was a couple years later, and I attended a summer program called Seeds of Peace, which is a summer camp in Maine that brings together kids from Israel and various Arab countries to spend a summer in a U.S. summer camp setting, learning how to sleep in the same bunk, eat meals together, play sports together. And they bring a few Americans along to teach everyone how to get along. So the two of those things combined 2001 and then 2003 at Seeds of Peace got me very interested in the Middle East. I think there was a lot of U.S. engagement in the region at the time, and seems to be again. And that led me down a path of wanting to learn more about the region, understand it, and potentially work in it. And so that's what led me to Princeton and a degree from the School of Public and International Affairs, and studying Arabic, studying a little bit of Hebrew as well, and then living in the region multiple times over.
What were those experiences like, being on the ground in the region early in your career, coming out of Princeton, and even while you were in school? So what were some of the things that you took from that time being immersed in those cultures?
At the end of the day, people are just people, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are. Everyone just sort of wants to live their lives, and there's a lot of headlines about, war, politics, terrorism, what have you. But that's not most people anywhere in the world. Most people are just trying to live their lives. When I was living in Jordan after college, I was studying Arabic. I was teaching English at a school that was essentially for hospitality and tourism training. All of these kids wanted to work in Jordan's nicest hotels. And English was obviously going to be a core part of that. Like, that's all they wanted. They wanted to graduate college and get a good job that was going to pay them a good wage so that they could go live their lives.
Have you kept up with the language?
Unfortunately, not so much. I still travel quite a bit these days, but it's really to our managers, and that's mostly in the US. So I haven't had much excuse to keep up with the language.
And have you been back to the region?
Not in a long time. Yeah.
Well, it's good you're here. We're happy you're in Philadelphia with us.
I'm glad to be here today too.
Yeah. And tell us about your early career. So when you think about coming out of school, I believe the first role was at a consultancy. So how did you come to that decision, and what were you looking to get when you left university?
The year that I spent in Jordan was the year that the Arab Spring broke out. Luckily, Jordan was okay, but there was a civil war happening in Syria. There was revolution happening all across North Africa. Like I said, Jordan luckily was okay, but I was happy to move back to the US when my fellowship year was over. I tried to stay in that world for a little while. I worked for a NGO in DC that was supporting election observation missions and civil society in the Middle East broadly. I was backing the Egypt team. There was a backlash against the Arab Spring, and my team ended up getting kicked out of the country. So I spent the summer of 2012 sitting at my computer, basically watching the London Olympics live, while supporting a field team that was just sitting in the conference room right next to my desk. And, I think that you should, in your career, always be either getting paid really well, learning a lot, preferably both. And if neither is the answer, then it's time to go look for something else. So that was how I ended up looking for something new to do. And that was how I found my way to Alvarez & Marsal, and started out on the public sector team, working mostly on state and local government issues. So still getting to put my public policy degree to work, just domestic instead of international. I was on the register for the Foreign Service and had hoped maybe to join the State Department. That was during sequestration, during the Obama years. And so they weren't hiring very many Foreign Service officers at the time. Ended up spending 4 years at Alvarez & Marsal. It was an incredible experience. I got to see the sausage really getting made in public policy, from a very different lens than you get in the classroom, where it's writing big think policy papers and how is this going to affect people with very scientific data backing it. Instead, we were getting into the nuts and bolts of how state and local government works, and that all started with the budget. So many of the projects were finding cost savings, finding new revenue opportunities, benchmarking against other states' best practices, finding operational efficiencies where we could. And there were a lot of lessons learned along the way about, not just how things get budgeted in the legislature, how things, get thought about from a top-down perspective, but then what individual people really need and the way government can work. It's very easy to go around and say, oh, well, we found this cost efficiency here. For example, there was one project that we were doing in Louisiana, and one of the recommendations was that there was a ferry that crossed the Mississippi River 24/7, 365. It was in a pretty rural county, and we said, maybe this ferry doesn't need to run between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. No one's using it. It looks like it makes about one crossing every 6 months. And the state senator that represented that district came to us and said, no, we got to keep this. That's the only way that the ambulance gets across the river. If the ferry isn't there, the ambulance has to detour 20 miles upriver to the nearest bridge. And, that can be the difference between someone living and someone dying if they have a heart attack on the wrong side of the river at 3 a.m. So a lot of lessons learned there about, what you see on paper and then what the impact really is on people's lives.
So how and why did you take those lessons into financial services?
So I loved consulting in my 20s. I thought it was a lot of fun. I got to travel all over the country. I got to see all sorts of different business problems. But I also was 100% travel. And, I got to a point where I was looking in the mirror and looking at the senior people on my team and saying, maybe I want to see my family more. Maybe I want to see, have a little bit more of a stable home life than being on a plane every Monday morning and coming home every Thursday night. And so that was what led me to business school and to think about how I could take some of the things that I really liked about consulting, seeing a lot of different types of business problems, discovered that I really liked finance, but take out some of the things that I didn't like as much about consulting, like being 100% travel and having maybe not the best alignment of interests with the people that I was ultimately working with and for. There's a lot of consulting where you come in, you assess a business problem, you write up some recommendations, and then you hand it to your client and you say, good luck, hope this works out. Alvarez and Marsal, I think, is a lot better about that than many other consulting firms. We really prided ourselves on doing the implementation work. And that Louisiana project that I mentioned, it's a very public project, so I can talk about this one. By the time we left, we had actually found real savings for the state that were 10 times more than the fee that they had paid us. So, we were doing the implementation work in a lot of cases, but still that alignment was not always there. The more I thought about career paths that I could take, and the more I thought about investing, and particularly in private markets, that alignment seemed much better. And I could combine that with the things that I liked about consulting and potentially have a great and really long career there.
So when you were down in Charlottesville, did you have a sense of the asset class that you wanted to go into or the type of services within finance? You're coming with a consulting background, so investment consulting could have been a natural extension to what you were doing, but you went in a slightly different direction. Could you tell us why and where?
I had a few hypotheses when I came into UVA. I wasn't 100% sure which way it would go. I knew I wanted to be in an investing seat. That to me seemed like it would be the most exciting thing. It would have me closest to learning about the business problems, getting to see a variety of different things. And like I said, the more that I learned about public markets, about private markets, I wanted that alignment, and the alignment seemed best in private markets and less in publics where you're just paying attention to what's the next quarterly earnings.
So tell us a little bit about the steps before getting to WMS and ultimately now HB Wealth.
So I spent 2 years at Darden just trying to be an absolute sponge for all things investing. Spent my summer internship at a venture fund in Washington, D.C. called Sinewave Ventures. It was a small firm at the time. It was early in Fund 1. They took me on for just about no money. It was really just to be a learning experience. Unfortunately, that meant that there was no budget to hire me full time at the end of the day because it's one of the best performing funds of that vintage. Several years down the line here, but great job by them. Wish that I could have been a part of that. Went back second year, knew that I was going to have to re-recruit, really just pounded the pavement, knocked on every door, sent every cold email. Luckily found my way to BlackRock. They happened to be recruiting for a full-time position, and the timing just sort of worked out. They weren't trying to hire someone who was graduating from business school or anything like that. Their hiring process was starting in October. When I first saw the job description, I reached out to the hiring manager who happened to be an alum, and I said, hey, I'm not graduating until June, but can we at least have a conversation, get to know each other a little bit? I'd love to learn about your business. And luckily, the process just kept dragging on a little bit. And suddenly it was January and they're like, hey, come in for a super day and maybe we can figure this out. And the offer materialized right before graduation. So everything ended up working out, but I definitely white knuckled it through second year of business school while all of my friends had their job offers already and they're off traveling the world and having a lot of fun. And I'm like, all right, well, it's another Friday where everyone is at the vineyards outside of Charlottesville and I am on Zoom trying to find someone who will give me a job.
That's good advice, though, for students, especially tuning in. It's not easy to network and it's not easy to find that first connection. So tell us a little bit about where you are today. Andrew had mentioned in the beginning about the recent merger between WMS and HB Wealth. So for the audience who's less familiar with HB Wealth, could you give us a little bit of a context as to what the organization does and where you sit within the company?
HB Wealth is a $26 billion multifamily office and RIA headquartered in Atlanta with offices across the Southeast. I work out of our Baltimore office. We all joined up together via a merger about 6 months ago. We serve all range of clients from high net worth to true family office level clients. I lead everything that we do in private investments. So private equity, private credit, venture capital, infrastructure, you name it, sort of everything except for real estate. I have an amazing colleague who leads all of our real estate investing. And we're looking for all manner of private market solutions for our clients.
To take us maybe a step back. So when you think about the top-down approach, when you are setting the table and you have clients who are interested in private markets and you have this suite of asset classes that are available to them, many of which that you cover. So it seems like problem solving is a big component of what you like to do, but a little bit of a glutton of punishment. You like to take on new things and new challenges. So when you think about setting the table, what does that asset allocation discussion look like before the conversation with a client? So how does the team approach where they're going to be focusing their time?
Every client is different. And so we take a different approach to asset allocation for every client. It really depends. There's no one size fits all approach here. And really we look at things not just at the client level, but actually at the account level for every client, because they may have a trust, they may have a 401k, they may have a trust for their kids. Every single one of those accounts has a different purpose, a different duration, and so a different risk profile as well. Every single one of those accounts is going to have an investment policy statement, and we're going to treat every one of them a little bit differently as a result.
That makes sense. So let's just take, there's one client. When you think about how you balance the external research that you do in terms of manager sourcing and ultimately underwriting with building that in-house conviction. So whatever the house thinks is going to be an area that will be a good opportunity for your clients. How do those two kind of bridge together? So the in-house conviction with the manager research process that you begin.
There are a few different ways that we approach this. We have a series of access vehicles or commingled funds that our clients can commit into. And through that, they get access to an entire asset class. So we have a private equity access vehicle. We have a private credit access vehicle. Clients can get all of their private exposure via commitments to those. We also have a series of evergreen funds that if clients want exposure to that instead of drawdown or in addition to drawdown funds, we can give them that exposure as well. And then for our largest family office clients, they like to write their own checks sometimes. And where we can give them access to the private equity funds or the credit funds that we think we have the most conviction in, they have the opportunity to tag along with the access vehicles and come in as an LP themselves.
So when you're thinking about managers for those funds, what are some of the core non-negotiables? So when somebody calls you for the first time, what do you need to see, or what does HB Wealth or an HB Wealth client need to see before the work even begins?
Yeah, I'm at risk of sounding like a broken record here. Everything at the end of the day comes down to alignment. If someone has great returns, but they're not well aligned, that doesn't bode well for what might happen in the future for the next fund. Because especially with private markets funds, especially with drawdown vehicles, returns are all backward looking. And so you're always looking ahead and saying, okay, well, that's how the manager did last time. What's going to happen next time and what might be different?
How do you assess that alignment? We're going to ask you about the underwriting process. I know Andrew's got a lot of great questions waiting for you in that regard, but it's very qualitative. right? You're trying to assess alignment. You're trying to assess mission, values, all of those things that go into those conversations. What are some of the core consistencies that you utilize in order to make sure that that alignment is there?
I mean, one easy test is how much of the manager's net worth is tied up in their own funds. If they're eating their own cooking, that's always a great sign. You want someone to be maybe not completely all in. There is a level to which too all in is a bad thing, but you want someone to really be committed to what they're doing, because that way, if you win, they win, and vice versa. But there are a whole host of issues that we look for in the limited partner agreement and sort of throughout the diligence process that give us other tips on where there might be alignment issues.
Great, thank you.
Across your two main vehicles, private equity, private credit, how you think about splitting those up across the asset classes within private equity, buyout growth, is there venture capital you are allocating to within those vehicles? And then the same for private credit.
Our private equity access vehicle is largely buyout and growth. We have a little bit of venture. I think venture is a little bit different from those other strategies because it does tend to be much longer duration. Mm-hmm. And as we think about the lifetime of these vehicles, we don't want the underlying funds to be dragging them on and on and on, especially if there's only going to be a little bit of venture. Mm-hmm. To have that access vehicle stay open in year 15 or 16 because you have one venture fund underlying it that's keeping the whole thing open, that's something that we need to be really thoughtful about. So we are doing venture. We're doing venture in part outside of that fund and making it available to clients on a direct basis. Because you also need to be a certain type of client with a certain type of risk appetite and a certain type of duration appetite in order for venture to really be appropriate. Mm-hmm. On the private credit side, it's a very wide aperture. We are looking at everything. Direct lending is where we start, but we're looking at asset-based, we're looking at opportunistic, we're looking at special sits and distressed. We're looking at leasing strategies that may actually be equity strategies, but they have a credit-like risk-adjusted return profile. You own the assets, so whether that's infrastructure, whether that's aircraft leasing, you name it, we fit all of those things into a credit and credit-like bucket. I think of it more as long-term contracted cash flows than true credit. And we bundle all of those together into this access vehicle so that clients can have true diversified exposure to all of these types of strategies. And with the idea that they are non-correlated to each other. Mm-hmm. If clients like them and want to have direct exposure to some of them, we can do that also. I think the point of what we're trying to do at HB Wealth is trying to create a really bespoke experience for every one of our clients so that they feel like we are their family office and not just a multifamily office.
Yep. And, manager selection is obviously very important, but just as important is often the implementation and following a programmatic way to invest in private markets. I think you all have done that very well by setting up these commingled funds. Are these vintages you all are running every year, or how does that pacing look like generally?
Yeah, we're trying to make the pacing as straightforward as possible so that it's very easy for clients and advisors to understand when there will be a new one, how they should be committing, how they should be thinking about putting money in so that they get to an overall exposure to privates and to illiquid assets in general that they're comfortable with.
Maybe you could now take us through your typical underwriting due diligence process, how you might source ideas, what that looks like.
Let's start with sourcing. I think sourcing, again, is wide aperture. I'm looking for ideas everywhere, and the team is just constantly talking to people, being on the phone, whether that's talking to placement agents, talking to other LPs that we think really highly of. We get inbounds all the time, probably several a day. And that's part of how we train the junior team is just making sure that we look at every single inbound from everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's coming from someone who I've known for my entire career or someone who found me on PitchBook and they're cold emailing me. Someone on the team is going to take a look at it. We're going to talk about it as a team. It may only be for a minute or two, but we're going to talk about it as a team and build that pattern recognition together so that everyone understands what we're looking for. We also attend a lot of conferences. I'm on a plane all the time. There are some great conferences out there, especially for emerging managers. And the goal there is just to meet as many people as possible. I have a pretty good sense of what I'm looking for, but life is long, careers are long. Closed-end funds in particular are long. There are a lot of people who don't stay married as long as a private equity fund stays investing or stays harvesting. Yep. And so, this is at the end of the day really a relationship business. And we're looking to always be building relationships with people. It may not be for this fund, but maybe it'll be the next fund. I just want to always know what's happening out there in the market.
Yep. So once you start to have those conversations with the managers, what are the questions that you have found over the course of your career that tend to yield the most results? We released an episode, not to date this episode, but we released an episode today with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Chanel Brown, and she talked about how she created a bankruptcy folder in her inbox. So there's a folder over there where, unfortunately, if you don't make it through in the cold email, it goes into bankruptcy. How do you manage that inbox?
I do my best to be triaging. I try to set aside an hour or two a day to just focus on that and try to not be constantly in my inbox. Because if I was just constantly there, I would never get anything else done. But if I can set aside sort of 5 to 6 p.m. or 9 to 10 a.m., I can kind of clear out, hey, what came in overnight, what came in during the day. Obviously, if something pops up that's high priority in the middle of the day, if it's from one of my GPs, if it's from my CEO, I'll respond to that in the middle of the day. But I do my best to try to really stay focused on one task at a time. And I think if you're trying to do inbox management all through the day, you're constantly distracted.
No, I agree. So somebody makes it through that inbox. They're sitting across from you for the first time. Maybe you're in their offices or they're in your office. What are those questions that you have found have yielded the most results in really understanding what they do and how they do it as it relates to the opportunity with an HP Wealth client?
The question that we're really trying to understand, particularly with emerging managers, and by that I mean anywhere between fund 0 and 3, 0 being an independent sponsor, is why do you exist? Why does the world need another lower middle market software growth equity fund? There are lots of those already. And so what is it that you are bringing to the picture that is unique, that is different, and that will give you some sort of edge? That could be sourcing, that could be picking, that could be winning, that could be value creation. What I'm really looking for is self-awareness in the manager of what makes them unique, what makes them different, and what's going to give them some sort of right to win.
How about the duration of the underwriting process? I'm sure it varies depending on the asset class and the search that's going on, but just managing expectations for our asset managers who are listening in. Sometimes we all want things to move as fast as they possibly can, but there's a reality behind your time. There's a reality behind the clients. Could you help us manage expectations a bit as it relates to working with you all?
We can move incredibly fast when there's a really good reason to, particularly with re-ups. Like, we can get a re-up done in the span of a few weeks. In some case, it can take years. We're actually signing subscription documents next week for a fund that we've been talking to for over 2 years. And it's been a very educational process. It's a very idiosyncratic strategy. There was a lot to understand about it. It was a fund 1. We had to really get to know the manager, see the strategy develop. And that was a journey, but ultimately a very successful journey.
We're definitely going to expand on the fund 1. It's interesting. It sounds like you do look at emerging managers or managers that are earlier stage in their career. Before you do, I am curious that education component. I've found in doing this show now for over 3 years that the allocators, love the education side of it. They like taking in the information. They want to build as much of a case as possible before they present it. But there comes a time when you have to stop asking questions. When do you know when to stop asking questions and then start to move forward with the actual underwriting process?
So I think you're never really done asking questions, but you're always listening. And so the underwriting, I don't think of it as, you do the underwriting, you sign the subdocs, you're done, and then you come back a couple years later for the next underwrite. I'm constantly re-underwriting. We're always trying to be a value add LP and be helpful where we can. And so if we see a best practice that someone else is doing that we think someone else could implement and that would be really helpful, I'd love to be helpful where I can. I think it's very easy to just be kind of quiet capital. And some people think that's the best way to be an LP. And there are instances where that's absolutely true. But, as an LP, if you can be helpful to a GP in a non-interfering way, I'm always going to try to do that.
Just to round out the discussion on the underwriting process, what role does operational due diligence play in the ultimate decision and selection?
Operational due diligence is very important, mostly from a downside risk protection perspective. We want to make sure at the end of the day that we're not doing any harm to our clients first and foremost. Like that's the ultimate golden rule is do no harm, don't lose clients' money. And if we lost client dollars because of some sort of, whether it's fraud or other issue that could have been found through operational due diligence, like that seems like a really easy one for us to try to mitigate as best we can. So we're always doing ODD on every single one of our managers. There's a whole variety of things that we're looking at, from how they do their banking, what their cybersecurity looks like, you name it. We're taking a look at it. Sharing, again, to that point of being consultative, where we see best practices and can share them, we absolutely will with our GPs, because we love to see everyone leveling up and doing, the best thing that's out there. Especially since ODD, I don't think, or any of those operational things, like that's not where you can find a competitive edge necessarily. Just it's about best practices. And again, that's the consultant in me coming out a little bit. So, we're always going to be paying attention to what we find in ODD. But again, it's really about risk mitigation as opposed to, someone's doing this amazing thing, so therefore we need to invest with them.
Thank you for sharing.
You've worked on everything from direct co-investments, secondaries, fund commitments. Can you talk about what are the most compelling areas for you right now? And then additionally, are there areas you're looking to source new relationships? Obviously, HB and predecessor WMS have been active in private markets for a very long time now. So are there areas where you're underwriting new managers versus re-ups?
Take the first part first. So as I think about primaries, secondaries, co-invest, I think it's all about knowing yourself and knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are. All of those things have a place in a client portfolio. We'll always make primaries a core part of the portfolio because that's where you really have the relationship with the manager. You have that alignment. You're going to be with them hopefully for multiple funds. It's not just going to be a 10-year relationship of that first fund. It'll be 15, 20, 25 as you look out across Fund 2 and Fund 3 and Fund 4. So that'll, I think, always be the core part of our portfolio. Secondaries, I think, is about being much more opportunistic, where you can find a discount or you can shorten duration for a client who maybe doesn't want to be in venture for 20 years, but they would like exposure to venture. Maybe we'll go out and find them venture secondaries and shorten that duration to 10 years or 5 years. And, co-invests, I think, where you can do it well and where you can have great alignment with managers and do it with someone that you've known for a long time and trust. I think that's a great thing to have as a part of the portfolio. I think that independent sponsors are a really interesting space right now. So that's a wrinkle on co-investment, is a way to identify who the next really great Fund 1 or Fund 2 might be, is if you can find the independent sponsor before they even raise that fund. Co-investments introduce a whole different level of risk. And so we're incredibly careful and thoughtful about how we add that into the portfolio and where it's appropriate. It's absolutely not appropriate for every client. And, again, it's just about where are your power alleys? What are you going to be good at? Where do you have good alignment? And what's the level of risk and potential return that you're looking for? So that's part one. Part two, where we're looking for new ideas. I think it's not about, for us, finding specific industries, finding specific stages of growth or buyout or anything like that. I'm always looking for what's the best athlete on the field, who's going to be doing something really interesting, who's going to be doing something that is truly differentiated. I think that a portfolio naturally comes together and naturally diversifies if you look for who those best athletes are, because there's only going to be one or two best athletes in any given thing. And if you can be with the gold medalist, the silver medalist in healthcare investment and industrials and software, well, okay, now you're diversified. There you go.
This is a question that gets asked, I'm sure, of you often, but when you're thinking about your clients, a lot of education clearly goes into those conversations. So when you are considering the democratization of private markets, that it's becoming more accessible to more people, how does HP Wealth approach that accessibility and availability that is now there across these various asset classes?
Yes, there's a lot of conversation about the democratization of private investments kind of across the board now. It started with venture, now it seems to be everywhere. We try to be very thoughtful and very careful about how we talk to our clients about that, because there are a lot of ways that democratization of privates can go wrong. There can be some tremendous mismatches of duration, of timing, of liquidity. Everything is going great today because markets are going up and to the right today. The more of a mismatch that you have between the underlying investments that you have, their liquidity profile, their cash flow profile, and the duration versus some sort of evergreen structure, the more I am concerned about it. Where that leads us in client conversations is, again, to talking to them about what sort of differentiated experience they are having with us, whether it is through the drawdown vehicles that we manage, the access vehicles that we manage, or the GPs that we partner with, or the potential evergreen funds that we're looking at. I think it's really about helping them understand that we are doing something that I think is very different from what they could get at any other wealth manager, any private bank, anywhere else that they might take their money. And that's because, we have a team that is just relentlessly focused on sourcing the best ideas. We think we understand what the best part of the market is, where the risk-adjusted return is the most attractive, and then creating access for clients that many other non-institutional investors don't have access to. Democratization is great if all you want is private market beta. And I think we're really trying to find private market alpha for clients.
Zach, thank you so much. This has been incredibly insightful, not just to learn more about you, but to learn about HP Wealth. You've had some incredible experiences throughout your career, domestically and overseas. What are some of the lessons that have stuck with you as you try to pay forward as a leader with your team and with students that you might be interacting with?
Again, to your question about inbox from earlier, I got to where I am because there were a lot of strangers who were very generous with their time, and I had the most tenuous connection to them, whether it was through an alumni network or something else. I appeared in their inbox one day and said, "Hey, can I borrow 15 minutes of your time? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? I want to learn about what you do. I want to see if there's some sort of potential opening for me on your team." There have been a lot of those people who were very generous with their time. And so when I get one of those in my inbox, I do my absolute best to make time for that person. I can't promise to every single person listening that I can do that. There are only so many hours in the day, but I really do try, especially with students, to engage with them, to help them out, to give them a shove in the right direction. So that's number one. I think number two is I've had some fantastic mentors through my career. They've been incredibly helpful in getting me to where I am today. And so I take engaging with my team incredibly seriously and trying to always be helping them think about how they can level up, helping them help me think about how I can help them level up. The team is only going to be as good as the junior people at the end of the day because I depend on them for so much. And so I invest a ton of time in training them, in getting them to be working relatively independently so that we can cover as much ground as a team as we possibly can. In football, people talk about coaching trees all the time, and obviously coaches are number one, judged by their win-loss record, and number two, judged by how many championships they won. But I think number three is, like, a lot of coaches are judged by their coaching tree. and who worked on their staff and what success they went on to. And so I think about that a lot and hope that, as my career grows, that my coaching tree continues to grow.
Well, we hope so too. Thank you for sharing that. One of the characteristics that doesn't get mentioned often is generosity, being generous with your time, being generous with advice, and being generous with your tree. So thank you for sharing that. We wish you nothing but continued success. Thank you for joining us on the desk in Philadelphia. It's always a pleasure to have people in person, and this particularly was a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. It's been great.
Andrew, as always, I love the conversation. It's always good to see you.
Fantastic discussion.
Wonderful. If you'd like to learn more about Zach and the work being done at Homrich Berg, please visit their website at www.homrichberg.com. You can find this episode and past episodes on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. We're also available on YouTube if you prefer to watch while you listen. And for additional content, please check out our website at Dakota.com. Zach, thank you again for joining us. Andrew, thank you as always. And to our audience, thank you for investing your time with Dakota.
Don't say goodbye.